So interview with Robin from Blackadder and Clydesdale then. So how did your interest in whiskey start?
Well, I started drinking at an early age, but that was generally milk in those days.
Yeah.
And as I was, I suppose, in my late teens, really, was when I first drank whiskey. But my interest was more in wine and food. I suppose, you know, you're that sort of age growing up, and I was working in children's publishing, which then became pop TV music business as a journalist. And I suppose I had a lot of interest then in wines, a little interest in whiskey, and I decided that I didn't want to be interviewing and running photo sessions with the likes of ABBA and Gary Glitter, or not just people like that, not that ABBA were, but Gary Glitter certainly. I was getting a bit old for that, so I looked for a job in magazine publishing, and one or two things came up, and something I went to work for a company called Business Press in Sutton, just south of London.
Yeah.
And I took a job on a particular magazine, waiting for another one, which was on Drinks International. So after about 6 months I switched to Drinks International, and I worked there as assistant editor for about 3 years.
Okay.
The then editor, she was somewhat, she sadly passed on some years ago, somewhat the legend, Pam Massingham, and she was much more interested in the wine side of the journalism. It's a marketing publication. Yeah. And so I got the job of looking after the whiskey and other spirits, and so one of the first things I had to do there was to actually go on a press and trade trip up to Scotland to visit Glenfarclas distillery.
Oh.
I remember the amusing thing then, I was sitting next to someone I got to know more in recent years. He went on to different things, a gentleman by the name of Mike Collings.
Oh.
And I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he was then working for Saucony and Speed, who were looking after Glenfarclas. And he then went on to join what became Diageo. He created the classic malts, Johnny Walker Blue Label, etc. We had this close affinity because as we're coming towards Inverness to land, and we're by chance sitting next to each other on the plane suddenly dropped maybe 200-300 feet, whatever it was, I don't know how far, but it suddenly went like this. Yeah. And it straightened out pretty quickly, and we looked at each other. And so we still now, and I've met him more recently, and in fact we're involved in some business together in Japan and otherwise. And we still remember having this near-death experience as we put it together. So it's funny how things work out. But then I started a company called Master of Malt, and this was in the mid-1980s. Basically, the idea was to publish a book, The Malt Whisky File, which I was working on at the time. And we ran a small whisky club, which didn't go so far, but the Master of Malt had a shop in Tunbridge Wells, a small shop where quite a lot of mail order, and it was all working fairly well, but other people were involved, and the other people really, I think, wanted to move the shop somewhere else, which I didn't agree with, and certain things that we didn't see eye to eye with, and I wanted to bottle whiskey rather than just be the shop, I suppose. And there's nothing wrong with the people there. I mean, the person running the company now was playing with my son when they were little. You know, I have some funny memories of that time. I shouldn't have let him near a box of matches, but that's another matter. But so yeah, and so I left in 1995, and on the 1st of April officially started Blackadder.
Okay.
Soon after, I had problems with import in Sweden, and I was then I came here. There was a certain time in my life, if you like, and We got the import going in Sweden, but it went through a couple of different formations, and Thomas got involved fairly early on, but unfortunately we didn't start our own company then. We actually were allowing other people to do it, and when the timing was right, and then we started Clydesdale, and we haven't looked back since. That's mainly because Thomas knows what he's doing, very much so because he runs the company.
Yeah.
And I just sort of chirp in when he wants me to, and sometimes when he doesn't want me to, and it kind of works. And then we both get involved with the casks in Blackadder, whereas you see we have all the samples housed here now, and we're try to work on with that and the portfolio in Clydesdale, and to develop whiskies for the range that we're bottling and rums in Blackadder, as well as what we're doing in Clydesdale. Most of what we bottle comes to Sweden in some form or other. Not everything, obviously, but there's not many things that we bottle that some bottles don't come to Sweden.
Okay.
So, and it's gone on from there.
Yeah. Do you have a big whiskey collection at home, or do you keep everything here?
Well, I don't so much have a whiskey collection. I mean, I have got bottles in my flat, because I'm based mostly in Stockholm.
Yeah.
And we have a few bottles here in the warehouse. I tend to keep back now a couple of bottles from each cask that we bottle, partly for posterity and partly for having something to pour, and also if there's a special event and you've got something you can take along that you've kept back, that's maybe older, that people haven't expected, and then you can give them a nice surprise. So I'm not one for collecting whiskey per se, although I have got a few bottles that are worth money that I have kept. Yeah. But I don't collect in that sense. I prefer drinking.
Yeah. Do you have any favourite whiskey you like to drink?
Oh yes, everybody does.
And what's your favourite?
Well, at the moment, this one. You know, one of the things that I don't believe in doing is discussing what with other people. Oh, this is my favourite whiskey, or that's my favourite whiskey. I mean, I've obviously got a fond feeling and memory for Glenfarclas, for the reason I was talking about earlier, and I've never forgotten the kind hospitality that has more than one occasion been shown to me by John Grant. So I have many whiskies that I like, but then you see, it's not really about the distillery, is it? Because everyone thinks whiskey's this distillery or that distillery. It's not, it's this cask or that cask. When you come down to moving away from the blends or the vattings of casks for the big brands, you're looking at individuals, you know, and you look around this room, you'll see individual bottles, and you'll see 3 individual people at the moment, you know. I mean, we've all got similarities and likenesses and things that we like, but we're not the same. So the fun of whiskey or rum, any spirit that you want to bottle from a cask, is either you've got 2 choices, or 3 choices really. You can either marry several different things together and make a blend, or you can marry several of the same together and make a vatting, and then you will probably colour it up because you can't colour it down, so you'll add spirit caramel so it's always the same colour, and you'll put a lot of casks together, and then you'll filter them, sometimes quite heavily, to remove oils and fats, which by definition removes flavours from the spirit. So the other choice you've got is to look at individual casks and buy single casks, or maybe just 2 or 3 casks together, so that you've got something that's much more individual. So for smaller companies, obviously this is the route that excuse me, this is the route that we take, because no small company's ever going to be able to compete with the big guys.
Yeah. No, that was the questions I had, so thank you very much.
Cheers.